Alright, so we are going to discuss about the question and answers of the chapter of chemical control and coordination here. Means it's about the small whatever type of questions are like sit how to write the entire thing. So keep in mind always as per the requirement of the CBSE board that your answer should always be to the brief, means it will be directly to the point and write only the answer whatever is necessary. Like for instance, if we talk about the secretion of adrenal medulla, okay, means secretion of any gland. This chapter is mainly about the endocrine gland, so here questions are usually set in this manner of secretion of like any gland. So if you're talked about, like if you're asked about the secretion of adrenal medulla, then you need to write about the medulla only, and that too of the the gland only, the medulla region, because there are the cortex region is also responsible for secretion of other hormones, but we are not going to concerned about that. We are not going to be concerned because it's not asked. Okay, so always write to the point, whichever question, whichever part it has been asked, interpret the question and then write the answer properly. So since it was asked that the secretion of the medulla, so medulla secretion is adrenaline and the noradrenaline. Now, when it is a 1 marks question, if you simply write adrenaline and noradrenaline, it will be enough. There is no problem there. But if it is a like 2 marks question or 3 marks question, you have to add a little bit more about it. For instance, if it is 1 marks question and you write by this like 2 words, this adrenaline and noradrenaline, that will be enough for 1 marks question, because writing just those 2 words also is valid for the CBSE board. But if it is like a 2 marks question, then you have to definitely write it in sentence that from the adrenal medulla this hormone secreted will be adrenaline and the noradrenaline, which are responsible for maintaining the stress response of the body or regulating the stress response of the body. So that is actually the brief function of these two hormone, and that you have to mention there, because it is responsible for helping in the stress response. Whenever there is a stress, it actually either fight it out or it make you respond to it properly. So that's why this particular thing has to be mentioned like that particular way. Now, talking about the secretion, whatever secretions, oh, sorry, yeah, there's one more thing that will be about 2 marks question. So, definitely, now there is a question like if it is a 3 marks, then what to write? Definitely, this will not be a 5 marks question, surely, right? Now, if it is a 3 marks question, again, you'll write about this two only, but now you'll elaborate about each and every one of them in detail. For instance, the purpose of adrenaline, what it does, the functions of them, right? And at the same time the noradrenaline, the function of it, you have to elaborate that in slightly extended manner. Now when you write about that, you also if possible mention if it is excessive in the body, what kind of responses it does, it gives. For instance, one thing can be mentioned there. In case of the secretion of this particular hormone, as you know, the body can respond as a flight or fight way, so you have to mention that also in that particular answer. Now there is one thing, student, there is a tendency of including the diagram in the 3 marks question, because yes, it is suggested by everyone that 3 marks question can carry a diagram if needed. But there is the thing, if needed means if it is a question which you have to explain the structure, if it is a question where you have to describe certain anatomy or some physiology of certain thing, that time you can include the diagram. But at this particular moment there is no need of the diagram there. It won't serve any purpose here, because drawing this adrenal medulla there, it was not asked, isn't it? So that there is no need for you to draw the structure of it or the cross section of the adrenal gland. So you simply write the answer and just it's a simple textual type of answer. But then there will be some question where the physiology you have to explain, where you have to explain the anatomy of the structure or anything like that. In those cases you have to include the diagram definitely. Now let's come to another type of question which was usually asked from this chapter, which is the hyposecretion and hypersecretion of certain hormone. So whenever we talk about that, definitely it means it is definitely like any hormone. Like for instance, if you consider this hormone, the growth hormone, or the STH, which is also known as the somatotrophic hormone. So if we mentioned about that, and yes, please keep that in mind that whenever you write the initial of any hormone, at least once in your answer at the very earliest, you should mention the entire hormone name properly. Like in the beginning of the answer, you are writing that it is a growth hormone, within bracket you are writing GH, and then you mentioned that it's also known as somatotrophic hormone, within bracket you write STH. If you mention that once, then for the rest of the part of the answer you can actually write the abbreviation. There is no problem there. Okay, so what are the two problems that it disorder it happen if it is produced in less amount or in high amount? So we have gigantism, which is a condition which we see when there is hypersecretion of GH hormone taking place, isn't it? Body grows extensively larger than it is supposed to. In dwarfism, it is just the opposite, in which body will have a retracted growth, means limited growth, just because the GH hormone is not present in proper quantity. So in those two cases, you have to mention it likewise, like what happens, what are the points are there. Now, which particular disorder to learn, which particular disorder not to learn, that completely depends on the syllabus that is mentioned by the CBSE, and that is given there in the NCERT book. Because for the general purpose of the board examination, or for the general purpose of the school level examination, only these two will actually play an like enough role, because whatever is mentioned there is no question going to be asked other than like outside that or beyond that particular thing. Because every single endocrine gland has got its hormones, which many of the hormones which have got different kind of disorders because of their hypersecretion or hyposecretion. Now all of them you cannot study and remember, it's not possible, isn't it? So just stick to whatever there in the scope of the syllabus and study about it. And definitely whichever hormone it is mentioned, even if the name is mentioned in the NCERT book, at least what happens, that few features you have to study properly, right? Like extended growth, bone development is enlarged, more muscle growth and everything, all these things, whatever like features and points are there, it is readily available in reference books, it is readily available in the online, like Google, simple Google it, you will find the disorder, like what are the symptoms, what are the things that can be observed in that particular condition. All those things it can be seen, you see that, you read that, and also if necessary you study, like you just go through a picture or two about it to remember, because seeing the picture can actually it gives a good imprint in your brain, and you will be able to remember the thing properly, and will be able to recollect it also properly. That's why try and see the pictures also given there. Now finally, one more type of question that can be set is actually the regulation. So regulation is what we have discussed previously, the feedback mechanism. Now what is feedback mechanism? If you know, like say we are talking about a particular hormone here, thyroxine. Okay, thyroxine hormone, which is responsible for increasing the body's metabolic rate, basal metabolic rate we can say. So that basal metabolic rate that it increases, it is because of some requirement, isn't it? Like body needs to produce more and more heat, or it needs to generate more energy. So for that the basal metabolic rate, it actually is increased. Now if that is no longer required, then that thyroxine is going to be a problem, because increased BMR is not going to be like helpful for the person if it is not necessary. So how does this thyroxine comes like finally secreted from the thyroid? As you know, it is secreted by the thyroid gland. So the secretion, it completely depends on the hypothalamus. Okay, hypothalamus is going to release the thyroid stimulating hormone releasing factor, which will go to the anterior pituitary, which will now release the thyroid stimulating hormone. Thus it will go to the like thyroid gland, which will now produce the thyroxine hormone. Now that thyroxine hormone will increase the basal metabolic rate of the body. Now if it is not required, then this excessive thyroxine that is present in the body more than required, it actually will go back and will induce the like signal the hypothalamus that it doesn't need it. So the TSH-RF secretion will completely stop, and if that stops, then the rest of the entire process will stop. This process is what is known as negative feedback. So while explaining this particular type of question, for explaining this particular type of like whatever is given there in your like, definitely this will not be of 1-2 marks question, there will be 3 marks around question. So in that case, drawing this particular flow diagram and explaining the entire thing in a short paragraph, that will be enough. Okay, because if you draw this like diagram and you write about it, and then you write the negative feedback, what does happen in the negative feedback in short, That will be an enough explanation of this feedback mechanism instead of writing this in a big paragraph, because this can be extended into a very big paragraph if needed. But that excessive writing is definitely not something that the board suggests, because as I have mentioned before, brief, that is the most important thing about the CBSE answering pattern. So you have to keep that in mind, and that is how you're going to design your entire answer. Okay, so these are the few questions I wanted to discuss about, like the way the questions are set in this particular, from this particular chapter, and how you are supposed to answer them.